Hello guys, and welcome to another edition of Rage Against the Dice. Today, we're doing something we haven't done in a while, which is a painting video. Now, if you watched our previous video on Don't Look Back by Blacksite Studios, we did the unboxing for the Founding 1698 Core VHS, in which there was 4 new characters and a new killer. Now, the new killer is what I have in front of me, and I thought, since I need to paint him anyway, I would actually do a video on it, because A, we haven't done a painting video in a while, B, he should be really easy to paint up, and C, if I'm doing a video for him, then it might force me to actually paint something. So, this is the killer in question. He's really, really cool. He's got, obviously, the big old-school style saw. Now, I have primed him in Trench Brown, which is a colour by Colourforge, I believe. Yep. And it's a Games Workshop-esque colour, almost the equivalent of Gawthor Brown, which is this colour here. Or your equivalent in Too Thin Coats, etc., who... I've got it up there, I just can't find it at the moment, but I'm getting into replacing all my GW paints with Too Thin Coats, so eventually that'll be, like, everything I use. Gawthor Brown is in the Dryad Bark, Gawthor Brown Baneblade, kind of 3 scale that Games Workshop use. As said, there is an equivalent for Too Thin Coats. There'll be an equivalent for Army Painter and a few of the others as well. So yeah, we're going to get painting with this today. I've got my wet palette in front of me. This is just a cheap wet palette that we got sent. We were originally meant to do a review on it. But I ended up not doing so because I didn't like the quality. I let the company in question know, and they said it was fine to keep the palette and not do anything with it. The palette itself is actually brilliant. The sponges are brilliant. It's the paper that you get with them is absolutely crap. I'm using my ones from my Green Stuff World palette that I did a review on, gosh, during the pandemic maybe, a bit after that. But yeah, so I'm just going to be pottering along, showing you, obviously, what colours I'm using and things like that. So this is majority going to be browns for, like, the top clothing and the hood. Obviously, skin colour is skin colour. Probably just going to do him in a more Caucasian skin colour, because A, the time period, 1698, and also making the killer of a dark skin might be a bit problematic in this day and age. You know me, I walk a fine line at the best of times, so we're not going to push it. Then I'm probably going to do the trousers like a grey or a black to simulate sort of a leather of the time. But yeah, so what we're going to start with is we'll start with some Gawthor Brown. Now, I do mix all my paints up with Lamy and Medium. I'm trying out a new little arm thing on my painting table, so it might rock a little bit, and I won't know until I actually start. That's the kind of consistency I'm looking for there. It is just 1 part Gawthor and 1 part Lamy and Medium. Like I said, it's been a very long while since I painted on a camera, so you'll have to bear with me. Said I'm doing Gawthor for the main thing. I'm just using a basic sort of medium brush here. Your particular brand may vary. These are just cheap ones that I bought originally for a Are They Any Good video, which were videos, as you might recall, we used to do where we'd buy cheap brushes. My camera's not focusing very well there, I do apologise. It's trying to focus on my hand, I think, as opposed to thing. But yeah, so as I was saying, we did a lot of previous videos where we'd go and we'd buy cheap brushes and we'd see how well they actually worked. Some of them came out quite good, some of them were a bit crap. I'm one of those people who doesn't like to waste things, so I've essentially just been still using them anyway because we got them. Some cases we bought them, other cases we got sent a few brushes for free. But yeah, so I'm just base coating the whole model in Gawthor Brown again, because that's the colour that I want to use as my base. Now what I'm going to do with this is, normally what I would do is, you guys might recall from previous videos, is I would do all of kind of the tunic, and that's layer up, base, etc. Base, layer, wash, highlights, etc. And then I would move on to the next piece because I'm weird and that's how I like to work. With this one, because I intend to cover the whole model in Agrax wash anyway, I am just going to give the whole model its base coat, and then I'm going to go in and do something different with it. So with the sack, I want that to be more burlap sacky, if that's the correct choice of words. I don't know that it is, if I'm honest. So I am going to use a different kind of brown for that than the Gothor. I said it. Because it's a new arm I'm using, and it's technically a new camera since last time I did any filming. It's not a new camera last time I did any paint filming. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go give this a second coat off camera, because it'll just be the same as the first coat, and that's not overly exciting. But it is basically going to be the same. one part Gothor brown, 1 part Lamian medium. I'm just going to give it that second coat. Now with this, what you could have done is you could have done the waistcoat as a separate colour and the arms as a different colour. Because I just want to get it done, and done well, but also quick, I'm keeping it all one colour. I want the colours and stuff to be muted on these because, as I said, this particular model and this particular expansion is set in 1698, where the colours realistically would have been a lot more muted. So that's why I'm doing that. So yeah, I'm going to go away, give it a second coat, and then we'll come back and we'll do the trousers, and then we'll do the mask, etc. But yeah, we're just taking a bit of a time, enjoying what we do. So yeah, I'm going to give this a second coat, and then we'll come back, and then we'll move on to the trousers, which I believe I'm going to be doing Corvus Black for Games Workshop, or whatever the equivalent is for like Army Painter. I think Army Painter, 2 thin coats. I believe it's German Grey for Vallejo, because that's how we first used German Grey. But yeah, that's by the by. When I come back, we'll talk about that more. That'll have had its second coat by then. In terms of the base, I just slapped on some textured paint. And I did that before I sprayed it, because I'm going to go with a Morn Fangy kind of brown for the bases, so it matches some of my other killers. Because although this guy is a model for 1698, you could quite easily use him for a modern times game. Don't Look Back's very flexible like that. Plus the fact that you can use time travel. You can use the fact that he's just someone who was, come back from the dead or anything like that. Someone who was specifically dressing up as an old-timey thing. You've seen Scooby-Doo. You know how they like to scare people. But yeah, anyway guys, I'm going to give this second coat, and then we'll come back and we'll move on with the next part of the video. So we are back. As you can see, I've just given it a second coat. So next thing we're going to do is the Corvus Black. Now, with Corvus Black, I find the coverage can be a bit hit or miss. So I tend to, with this, go with a little more Lamium. A little more of the black, a little less of the Lamium medium. So I'll usually go 1 to 2 on this. So 1 Lamium medium, and then 2 Corvus Blacks. What Corvus Black will usually let me know. So yeah, so you're kind of wanting that kind of consistency. As I said, for here, we're just going in. I need to get one of those cameras that attaches to my head or something, don't I? Going in, and I'm doing being a little sloppy in places because I can. Obviously around bits I've already painted, I try and keep that as neat as possible, but I don't mind being a little sloppy elsewhere across the feet and things like that. Now, with the shoes, I am going to also do those in a black, because they're like the old, like, buckley shoes, but I'm going to do those with a darker black, because I want them to have a more sort of pronounced colour to them. So I'm probably just going to use Abaddon Black for that, or whichever equivalent, as I have Army Painters Black, I have Vallejo Black, I have Two Thin Coats as black, and then obviously I have Abaddon Black from Games Workshop as well. Always on the lookout for the best paints. Now, mainly I find at the minute that Two Thin Coats are my absolute go-to for paints. However, as you will probably find yourselves, different brands, different coverings for different colours. So if there's a Games Workshop colour that I like better, I just stick with that. If there's a... that's the guinea pigs fighting. They still do that. But yeah, if there's an Army Painter colour or a P3 that just covers better for what I need, then I'll just use that. I don't have any kind of loyalty to any brand of paint, because at the end of the day, they're all just businesses, and they all just want our money. Yeah, you either are okay with that or you're not, depending on your level of enjoyment of capitalism. But it is realistic. Like, you might like a company because they make nice paints, but they don't give a shit about you. Just if Games Workshop bring out a better paint than Vallejo, use that. If Two Thin Coats bring out a better paint, I do actually like Duncan, so that does help with the Two Thin Coats thing, but also I think that their range is really, really nice. So, as you can see here, this will need a second coat. It's not as bad on something like the brown, but if you've got like a white base coat or something, the white will still shine through a little bit on Corvus Black after one coat. So I will give this a second coat, then we'll come back and we'll move on to the hood. We do have obviously like the breeches down at the bottom, and we're going to do those most likely in white. And then, as I said, the shoes themselves are going to be a black, or I might go for like a brown, like a Rhinox hide. I'll see as I'm painting it how I feel. But yeah, I'm liking him so far. As I said, I'm going to go give him a second coat, and then we'll come back. What I might do is also find some source material style pictures just to see what colours they went with. See if I'm on the right tracks or not. Not that that's a big deal. Not that it matters hugely, but you know, it's always nice to have that reference. So yeah, guys, back in a minute. So this is where we're at so far. The pants are still drying a little bit, but because we're going to do the mask, I'm just going to jump to that now. With this, I'm doing Talon Sand. It's part of the Steel Legion Drab family, so Steel Legion Drab, Talon Sand, and then Karak Stone, I want to say. Yep. And again, every brand has their version of it. So with Talon Sand, it's a decent coverer, so I tend to just go 1 for 1, especially if you're giving it 2 coats. You can use it straight out the pot if you want. It's not something I would recommend. But that's just my own kind of thing. That's kind of where I would want it. So this is going to need a couple of coats. I'll pick the wrong brush as well. And you'll see this brush is not very nice these days. So I'm going to very quickly change brushes. I picked up one of my brushes that I use for mixing paints. Because I like to keep my brushes where possible. I don't throw them away. Sorry, put that in the camera would actually help. Oh, sorry, in the viewfinder. So as I said, with this one, kind of want to go with a very burlap-y kind of colour scheme. Even though it isn't a burlap sack, so I do want to differentiate from that. but I think it'll just make the model stand out a little more against the browns and blacks. And obviously it will darken up quite considerably once I put the brown wash over the whole model. So there's bits like in here that are really important to get. Right there, being careful not to go onto the tunic. Obviously, if you were so inclined, you could just spray this whole model white and paint it with speed paints, and in which case it would cut out a lot of steps, but I'm still pretty grumpy and old, and I kind of don't like speed paints. That's my preference. So yeah, this will absolutely need a second coat, and I'll need to go and touch up some bits. That's what she said. Sorry guys, I really am a grown-up, honestly. So yeah, I'm going to go give this a second coat, because it will absolutely need it once that dries. I'll put this away now. Then we'll move on to the skin next. With that, I'm just going to go straight with Acadian Flesh Tone. I think that'll come out well against the other colours so far. But yes, so I'll be back in a second. And then we'll get on to the Flesh Tone. And then the model's starting to take shape. It's starting to come together. If you wanted, you could go with a much darker brown for the hood. If so, I would recommend something like a Rhinox hide or even a Dryad bark, so it still matches vaguely in with the tunic. Because obviously the tunic we've gone Gothor, you'll highlight up with a Baneblade. You could go Dryad bark and then highlight up with a Gothor. It would tie the model in together a lot more. Preference-wise, as I said, I wanted to go with a lighter one. Apparently I'm... So, very quick aside is, I've changed my desk setup because I have more paints now as I've moved on to different ranges. So it means I have less space on my painting desk. So there's a lot of struggling for now until after Christmas, when I can like have time to and money to buy a bigger desk. So yeah, that's why occasionally I'll whack stuff and I'll hit stuff. I'm trying to make it all work, especially now we've expanded the guinea pig cage again to mega cage. If you follow us on Instagram, you may have seen it. But yeah, guys, I'm going to leave that to dry, give it a second coat, and then we'll come back and we will get sorted and start doing that skin. So we're back, and I've already mixed up the Cadian, so I kind of want that kind of consistency. Now, the reason I did that is just force of habit. I finished one colour, I mixed up the next, and I was like, I meant to be filming that. So it's actually 1 part Cadian Flesh to 1 part Lamy and Medium. It will need a second coat because Cadian Flesh doesn't cover brilliantly. I actually think the 2 thin coats version, which if you give me a second, I'll tell you what that's called, is a much better paint. Dwarven Skin. It's almost the same colour, but in my opinion, as I said, it is better. But just for video's sake, because more people will own Games Workshop paints realistically, I tend to just paint with them, so that if you wanted to replicate the exact colours I used, you could go out and buy them. Oh, sorry, you could usually take them from your own paint collection. That's not always the case, especially when we're covering like a very niche game like this, but as a standard rule, that seems to be the case, so I tend to use Games Workshop paints more so when doing tutorial videos than I do in my actual own painting, where, as I said, I mainly use 2 thin coats with a little bit of Vallejo, some Games Workshop, some Army Painter. I've started using AK quite a bit. As I mentioned before, these paint companies don't owe you anything, just use what works for you. And now, because more of the model's painted, I'm obviously having to be a lot more careful around things like the tunic and such. Around the sword, it doesn't matter as big a deal. All you gotta do is many jowly chins. The waddle under the neck. Around here. Now I'm going to be a bit lazy and I'm not going to do the eye sockets because I'm hoping that once the brown wash settles in, it will be enough that you wouldn't be able to see them anyway. That being said, if when I'm going through and doing the second coat I change my mind on that, then I'll let you know, obviously, when we come back. So yeah, I'm going to wait for that to dry. I'm going to go do the second coat, and then we're moving on to the last little bits. Pardon me. I'm going to do the saw. I'm just going to do that a full metal because I'm giving it a brown wash anyway, so that should add a bit of rust to it. We can also stipple on a bit of rust if we feel like we need to. Obviously, it is an older tool, so we might want to rust it up a bit because they would have been out in the elements a lot more. But yeah, I'll come back in a bit once that's had its second coat. Cadian Flesh Tone, as I said, is notoriously bad for covering on one coat at the best of times. And that's straight from the pot. This is obviously watered down, so it's even worse. You can put it over the top of Bugman's Glow, but I think Bugman's Glow gives it a darker colour. That's not what I want for this model. So, yep, back in a minute, guys. And then we will also move on with the next part, which is the saw. Right, guys, so just see, this is 2 coats of the flesh. On the second coat, I tried not to do any on the teeth. Now, I did some on the first thing of the teeth because I'm going to use Rakarth flesh very thinly on top of that as like a second coat, but I wanted the teeth to have that kind of colour underneath to give it like an ick. It was done with a purpose. I did end up having to go in and do the thing in the eyes. It bothered me too much. I tried to get away with not, but that wasn't happening. So, Lead Belcher. Now with this, I am going to use it straight from the pot. I wouldn't do that with other metals, like from other manufacturers, but I find Games Workshop's metals are okay to use direct from the pot. As I said, you could do this Warp Block Bronze or a brass or something first if you wanted to kind of add that rust level to it. We're going to add it afterwards instead, but it really is just down to your preference on this now. I kind of want the brush strokes to show a little on this, so I'm doing them very deliberately down. And I'm flipping that across. Being careful here, because obviously now we've got the Gorthor in and we've got other bits in, so we don't really want to be going over. Find as well that if I had watered this metal down, which you certainly could do, on top of the brown, that brown would shine through. So if you only did like a really thin silver coat to start with, that brown would show through and it would kind of add the rusted effect that you might want to be going for anyway. So because I play a lot of post-apocalyptic games and I love orcs and Necromunda and things like that, I do paint a lot of like rusted metal. So I find I am usually fairly competent in it. So I've got a couple of different techniques. I think I did a video on the channel once about it. That was to paint like the old school Games Workshop style of like orc So you'd do it with a wart block bronze, and then you'd go in with the metals and brown and black washes to kind of pick out. So there. This still will need a second coat. But yeah, so it's starting to come together now. Next thing we're going to do once this dries is we're going to move on to the Rakarth flesh, which is going to be for the teeth, and it's going to be for the... I can never remember the name of them. It's going to drive me absolutely insane. One thing to be aware of with Games Workshop Silver is the metal collects. Make sure you wipe your hands if this happens before you pick up your model, as so many times I've kind of ruined my model doing that. So I'm also going to clean this pot out. What happens is, you can see there, it builds around the side. You can just peel that off, but it's just a design of Games Workshop's horrific paint pots. But that's where we're at so far. I'm going to let this dry, and then we're going to do, as I was about to say, they're like the under trousers that they used to wear at this time period. You'll have seen them in period pieces. They're usually whites or creams. It's kind of like long johns, I think. But whatever they do have a proper name. I just, for the life of me, cannot remember it. But yeah, that's what we're painting next. That and the mouth. So when we come back. Back in a second, guys. So once again, force of habit. I've already mixed up the Rakarth flesh, but that's kind of the consistency. I did 1 for 1. And then just going in there, sorry. This bloody camera. Just going in and picking out the teeth. Dental hygiene, not what it was back then, obviously. So his teeth were a bit gross. So okay, we don't judge him. I'm British. I really can't say anything about teeth, can I? The internet knows. The internet knows. So I'm going with the Rakarth flesh instead of a white because I want a kind of creamier colour to them. I will inevitably highlight it with a white. I just know that from personal experience that the Rakarth will take the brown wash better and will give it that kind of grubby, more realistic tone. You've got to remember how these guys were washing their clothing at the time. You know, they didn't have brand new Samsung washers that have like little extra doors that you could throw your washing in after it started or anything like that. You know, this is washing in a stream, washing... Bloody camera. Like, even clothes that started white didn't stay white for long. And if you go with the white and then add the wash to it, it can go kind of a muddier colour that I don't want. Whereas the Rakarth flesh, being a kind of creamy colour, it does take the white really well. So that will need a second coat, but you can see where we're kind of going with it. I'm liking it so far. So yeah, after this we've got to do the shoes, and then we've got to do the little brown handle, which I'm going to do the same colour as the base, which will just be Mornfang. So because everything is going to get washed, including the base, we are going to put do the base coat on the actual base itself before we add the wash. Now normally I finish a full model and then I go in afterwards and I do the base to them. The reason that I do that is so that I can then use the colours from the base to go a little on the shoes or to go up the legs to add a bit more realism to it. It's just how I paint. It also covers up the fact that I really hate painting feet on most models, so I can be a bit sloppier with it, and then I can kind of patch that up through the base. One thing I will say is the reason I use wet palettes, as you can see there, all the colours are still usable. So if I did, say, make a mistake when doing the silver and I went on the top, I could go back in with the same colour because I've already got it mixed up, and I could, you know, pick out some details. I could like patch that up. So a wet palette is really, really good for that. One thing to note is use a bit that's the same size as the thing, because you can see there where it's gone off onto my sponge. Now I don't mind that because this sponge is getting thrown away anyway, because it's basically been on there for about 6 months and it's really coming to the end of its life. But yeah, as I said, because I like the Green Stuff World papers better, I put them in that palette, but that palette is way bigger than the Green Stuff World palette one. So occasionally you'll get stupid things like that. Now I have so many sponges, it doesn't matter. It's not the end of the world at all. But yeah, anyway, I'm going to let this dry. I'm going to do the second coat of Rakarth Flesh just on the legs. The teeth don't need it, because as I said, I want that to be a bit thinner so the other colours will show, the other colour, the pink, will show through, the flesh colour. And then we're going to move on to the shoes, which I still haven't decided are going to be jet black or they're going to be more of a Rhinox hide kind of brown. But yeah, I suppose I'll have to decide that soon as we're coming up to that point. But yeah, back in a second, guys. So this is us so far. You can see after the couple of coats that it's still got that feel to it. So I've already mixed up the black as well, sorry. As always, 1 for 1. Just going in. Now, I always mix black up a lot thinner, so I probably, even though it's 1 to 1, I probably used a much thicker a much larger brush full of Lamy medium, that's the word, sorry. It's been one of those days. Spoilers, but I'm actually filming this on my birthday, because my idea of heaven for my birthday is just to spend the whole day painting. It's one of those rare occasions where I have no children, no friends or family distractions. Not that my friends and family are a distraction, but you know what I mean. I'm not in any kind of relationship or anything like that. I'm not saying that negatively. Clearly I'm quite happy about this because I get to sit and paint all day. But yeah, this is rare for me to get a whole day to myself. That's actually not 100% true. Sparks is coming over later and we are going to be playing Trench Crusade, but as you know, one of my other favourite things to do is to game, so that should be good. If we get time, we might even play a little cards. We've got some new Dragon Ball Z cards and some new... Yeah! Sorry about that. I shrieked wildly. Yeah, so we have some Dragon Ball Z and we have some Gundam to play. We've got some new decks. I also have some new cards for my Final Fantasy deck. It's a Final Fantasy 9 deck. And because this is the Final Fantasy card game, it's not broken as anything like Final Fantasy 9 decks in Magic the Gathering, which made me really sad because Vivi is my favourite character, as you guys may know from... I think I've showed off my painted Vivi in the past. Vivi is my absolute boy. I love him. And so to see that in Magic the Gathering he sells for ridiculous amounts because he's broken beyond words made me quite sad. So I'm being a bit sloppy around the base because it doesn't matter because I'm going to paint the base anyway, as we've already established. But yeah, so I've given that a single coat. I'm now going to tidy it up with a second coat and probably go back and tidy up the Rakarth Flesh a bit, because although I was sloppy, I was a little too sloppy in the wrong places in some places. So yeah, this is where we're at so far. When we come back, we're going to be doing the base and we're going to be doing the handle of the wood. I'm not sure what I want to do with the buttons yet, whether I want to pick those out. But what I might do is I might paint the rest of the model, layer it all back up and things like that, and then go in and do the buttons separately, because I might either want to go back in with like a a dryad bark or something like that and highlight with a Gawthor, or I might want to go for black buttons. What I will probably do, because I'm an absolute goof, is I'll probably look online at clothing of the time, obviously around 1698, 1700s, and see what they probably would have had at the time. I'm suspecting they probably would have just had black buttons, so if so, I'll then do them black. But yeah, so I'm going to let these dry, I'm going to do a second coat, and then as I said, I'm going to tidy up the Rakarth flesh, because I was a little sloppier than I intended to, and then we're going to go in and do the base. But yeah, you can see how it's coming along so far. Things like the buckle we'll pick out at the end, once I've highlighted the shoe. That's just so that I can be a bit sloppier with the highlight, if I'm honest. You know, on this channel, we don't show you Golden Demon style painting. We show you quick and easy painting to get your models on the table as soon as possible. So yeah, guys, back in a minute, and we'll show you where we're at so far before we do the brown. Right, so you guys know by now, I've already mixed the colour. It's just a straight 1-for-1. Now, I have a tendency when I'm doing the first coat on a base to go 2 Lamia medium, 1 paint, in this case Mournfang brown, as I did mention near the start of the video. I just realised I hadn't said again. However, with this one, because I don't want it to take 3 months to dry, and with it being a 3D print, I don't want to dry it with a travel hairdryer, which is the only reason that someone like me would need a hairdryer in my house. I suppose I might need to dry my beard. Spoilers, I don't dry my beard, I just let it kind of dry naturally. Yeah, so I'm just going around. Because of where I've got the camera, it's a pain to get in. See, I don't mind if the brown underneath shows through a little bit, because it's brown and ground isn't exactly one colour, so it's not going to be the end of the world. That being said, anywhere where I was sloppy with the black, I have to make sure that that's covered. Although even that wouldn't be the end of the world. So under there you can see. So I'm just using a fat brush for this. I'm not weight shaming it or anything. It's just what it is. It's just a larger brush so that I can do it quicker. You can use whichever brush works for you. So I'm just... because I've used the textured paint very thickly in places because I wanted the ground to feel less worked. You know, this isn't, I would say British streets, but British streets are terrible. But this isn't like a nice, highly ploughed ground or anything like that. It hasn't had a lot of work done to it. The Romans didn't come in and put nice roads. This is, you know, architecture or like fertile ground that's fairly recently started to be stood on. You know, this is like a settlement, so the ground would have a lot more texture to it, a lot less flattened down and all that. So said, I mean, as careful as possible. However, next to the silver, it won't matter. Let me see. I did get a little on there. I just bit of water on the brush and move it back up. However, it doesn't matter if I get some of this brown on the metal because it will just add to the rusting effect itself. So that base will need a second coat. The handle probably will not, but this is where we're at so far. We're ready now, once this dries and I've given this base a second coat, to just absolutely slop this with Agrax Earthshade. If you want a less grotesque brown, you can water it down more. So I'm going to use it neat. I'm going to use Agrax straight from the pot. If you wanted it to be a less intense, less grubby brown, then you could obviously go and mix 1 part Lamia medium with 1 part Agrax. And that would be a less harsh brown for you. What I would say is I prefer Games Workshop's washes to Too Thin Coats or Army Painter. However, Army Painter's soft tone is absolutely beautiful for this step of a model, especially if you're painting something like Trench Crusade or older model, not older models in terms of like when it was made, but as in historical models where you want models to look grubbier and, you know, the colours to be less vibrant. Army Painter Soft Tone is absolutely perfect for that. But I'm going to use, as always, Agrax Earth Shades. So I'm going to let that dry. I'm going to go to the base a second coat. And then we're going to slap this whole thing with wash. One thing I will say, and again, just singing the praises of a wet palette. When it comes to the layering back up, I already have the colours mixed, or the colours ready because of the wet palette. If you didn't, you'd have to remix them again. It's not a big deal. I don't know, I like singing the praises of wet palettes, apparently. But yeah, back in a second, guys, and then we're going to slap this bad boy with Agrax Earthshade, and then wait, because it's the British weather, like 3 weeks for it to dry. So yeah, maybe my next birthday we can finish this video off. But yeah, back in a second, guys. So, here we are. This is it with virtually all its base coats on. As I said, I need to do the buttons black and I need to paint the gold on the buckle, but I want to do that separately. Other than that, there's not a lot to him. He has these little details on here, if you see. So I think I'm going to pick those out, maybe in Rakoff Flesh, actually. But I don't know. So I'm just shaking up the Agrax now. Games Workshop paints don't come with an agitator in. You can get from Army Painter a big pack of agitators for not much money at all. I got mine from there. What you can also do is, because Too Thin Coats do come with an agitator in. When they run out, you can cut the bottle in half and you can keep the agitators. Make sure you use good quality agitators, because what you don't want is rust in your paints. But anyway, without further ado, as it were, we're just going to slap this all over. I'm using a big brush because I'm lazy, and we're just slopping the whole thing on. Not being that careful. Still, you don't want it to pool, so if it's too thick in places, you can just use your brush to kind of manipulate those around. I don't really agree with manipulation as a general rule, but for paint, perfectly acceptable. Paint deserves it. Not that I'm victim shaming. Apologies, that's my attempt at a joke. I don't really humour them much anymore outside of my son, or sons. But my oldest is 17, so he doesn't really like to deal with humans. To be honest, I don't blame him. So yeah, I'm just, as I said, slopping it everywhere. And then on the base, I tend to put it quite thick on the base because I want this particular mud to look like trodden, and I find the overly wetness does that. So now what I'm going to do is I'm taking my brush and I'm just taking off some of that on the metal. You can see there, so I'm just jabbing it on, and again in other places too. I need to do the back of the metal still, so I'll get it covered, get in there, and then I'll go in and I'll just take some of it away. Same on the white, where I don't want it to be too thick, so I just go in with a wet brush and I just take away some of it. But yeah, now with this, it will need a second coat, but the second coat will be dedicated to places like the browns and the masks and things like that, where I will try not to do the second coat of it will be like the white socks or cream socks and things like that. But yeah, this is going to dry now. It will take some time. As I said, it's a 3D print model, so I don't ever like to take a hairdryer to them. I do own a hairdryer for such things, though. These tend to last me about 6 months and then they burn out. I just buy the travel ones. They cost about £6 on Amazon. You can pick them up in like Tesco or Asda or your American equivalent, Walmart, etc. But they're not very expensive at all. They last about 6 months till they burn out, and then you just replace them. You could buy a better quality one, but it's still only going to last about a year or so, so you might as well just go for the cheap ones. But yeah, I wouldn't recommend using them on resin or 3D print models, but they're perfect for metals and plastics, especially GW plastics. And if you live somewhere where it's cold, or like UK where it's moist all the time because it rains constantly, they're worth their weight. They really are. But yeah, I'm going to let this wash dry. I usually give wash about half an hour to an hour if I can't dry it with a hairdryer or anything like that. So yeah, it's what it is. I'm going to let this dry. I'm going to come back and we're going to go in. What I will do is there's places where there's folds in the material. I will just take a small thin brush and I will just apply Agrax to those areas specifically to make them a bit darker. What we're going to do after that is we're going to get some Nuln Oil and we're going to use that on the blacks and the metals. Not on the browns or anything like that. So that's going to be a smaller brush and we're going to apply it to just the areas we need it. But you'll see that when we get to it. So, back in a second, guys. Right, so this is where we're at now. You can see where I wiped off the large majority of the washer across the metal, but it still has some there. It gives it like a grimy effect. What we're going to do now is Nuln Oil. Again, I'm just using it straight, and I'm just applying it to the metal, just to give it that kind of look. And then on the trousers, and this is just going to seep into those recesses and do a lot of the heavy lifting for me. Again, around the boots, around the shoes, being careful not to go onto the breeches, I believe, maybe. There you go. Then get quite thick under there. So that is not in focus at all, guys. So this is where we're at with it now. Once it dries, we're going to come back and we're going to start layering up. Probably going to start with the trousers, because the trousers I'll be using the Corvus Black, which I can also use on the shoes, and then we'll go in and we'll do the rest. But back in a minute, guys. Once this dries, it can take some time. Right, guys, so here we are. There is our killer with his toothy little grin there. I'm going to go with this. It's like a number 3 brush, and I'm just taking the black that was already there, or not black, it's the almost black. It's the Corvus, and I'm just not doing it everywhere. I'm just picking out these raised areas, little bits under there. Oh. If you aren't using a wet palette so that you're having to mix it up again, as you recall, it was just a 1-for-1, so... Oh no, it wasn't, it was a 2-for-1, sorry. My apologies, I just deceived you guys. Yes, so it was 2 parts Lamia medium, or water if you use that, and then 1 part Corvus Black. And again, I'm just doing the same on the shoes, but I'm going straight with the Corvus Black. We're not using the black or anything like that first. just to pick out these little spots. Don't have to be ridiculously neat with these guys. So yeah. And then all I'm going to do is I'm going to take Ashen Grey and I'm going to mix that in. So I like to get a slightly wet brush, and then I'm just going to add one. So if you see there the difference between the two, that's the Corvus with the Ashen in it, and on the back of my hand it'll look like that. So then all we're doing is picking out the slightly more raised areas. Again, not getting everywhere. This is less of a highlight, and it's more of just like a relayering. And then for the shoes, I'm just doing that on the very, very edges of the shoes. And so that's it. Once that dries, I will need to give that a second coat because of how mixed it is. But then you'll be able to see what it looks like when it's done. So we'll be back in a second and I'll show you what that looks like. So that is what it now looks like. The highlight is a bit more stark. I'll show you off camera. So I've already mixed the Gothor up because, as you saw previously, I completely used all the Gothor that I had. Now I've mixed this up as a 1-for-1, exactly like I did previously, and what we're going to do is a different technique this time. So I'm just trying to find the correct dry brush of the many dry brushes I own. So if you just bear with me one moment, as I said, I've already mixed it up, and it's 1-for-1. Oh, this new desk. Oh, not new desk, but new paints, etc. on said desk. So what I'm doing here is trying to get the camera to focus. No easy task. Getting this Gothor brown on there, getting the majority of it off. And then I'm just lightly caressing over the raised areas. And I'm doing this for a very specific reason. I layered up the trousers because I wanted them to be a more leathery type material. This I actually want to look like it's a cloth of some description, so I'm using the dry brush to add a texture to it. So it's a very deliberate, and it's why I'm not going for like a layered effect. I'm just dry brushing it up, as I said. So we've kind of got that material-like quality to it. Now what I'm going to do, because the next colour is Baneblade, I'm going to add Baneblade into the Gothor. And once again, I'll show you what that looks like. So you can see there, the Gothor is there, and the Baneblade is there. I said it's the two mixed together, so it won't be like a completely stark. Again, mix it off. I don't wet the brush between, because if there's excess on it still, it doesn't matter. And again, I'm just going in and I'm just picking those bits out. And what I'm going to do once I've done this, because I want those lines and the differences to show up, I'm going to make a very, very watered down Agrax Earthshade. And I'm going to add that over the top as like a glaze. And what it will do is it will highlight all the different lines that the dry brushing has added. And you can do this as light as you want. You could then go with just a full Bane blade on its own. I am not going to. As I said, I'm trying to keep this relatively quick. But yeah, so you can see that. And at this stage, that's when I would wash said brush. I am now going to take my Agrax Earthshade. I'm going to slide you to one side, spin this in there. I'm going to use big brush, one thing of Agrax. Move my light up. And then just put that in. Another thing of Agrax. Oh, sorry, you got another thing of Lamia Medium. I'm just watering that down until the consistency is very, very like that. Then we're going to bring this guy back, bless him. I'll bring the light down so you can actually see him. And then we are going in. We're just adding that back in, and all it'll do is it'll just pick up all the lines and the colours, and you'll be able to see it much better once it dries, obviously. Yeah, I'll give a little bit to the mask, just cause a little bit to that, because there's no harm in doing so. So this will need 2 or 3 coats. So I'm going to go off, I'm going to listen to some Ice 9 Kills. It feels appropriate given what I'm painting. And I'm going to give this 2 or 3 more layers of that up, and then I'm going to show you it when it's done, and then we're going to move on to the mask and things like that. And we're going to use a very similar technique, or the same technique, if you will, because we want, again, the mask to have that textured feel to it. Now with that, we went Talon Sand, and then we're going to go Karak. And then we're going to mix a little bit of Screaming Skull into it. But yeah, so I'm going to let this dry. I'm going to come back and we're going to look at it. Right, so here we are. You can see what we did with the glazes and such. So now we're going to move over and we're going to do the helmet mask. So we're going to do the same thing again. So we're going to start with the Talon Sand, which I keep wanting to call Talon Flesh for some reason. And again, we're just dry brushes. And again, we want this to have like that textured, almost powdery look. I'm just building this up. A couple of little circular motions, but mainly going in the same direction to keep that kind of material look. So we're going with that. Then what I'm going to do is I'm going to add a tiny little bit of Karak Stone into the mix I already have. Now I don't want to add too much because Karak Stone will take it from being a yellowy colour to a more creamy colour. And we want that to go gradually. For the glaze for this one, we won't be using Agrax again. What we will use is like sepia. So yeah, just again, picking it out. back here. Trying not to get it onto the main top, obviously, because we've already mainly finished that. Go down here, get some that way. Go across here. And guinea pigs are playing. It's a nice little sound. So yeah, so feels a little slip knot, and I like it. So I'm just going down that way. Again, I'm just adding this kind of texture to it, which is obviously what we want. Because this is not only material, but this is something that would have been made by hand. This isn't something that he would have got from, you know, Amazon at Halloween, something like that. So adding a little more Karak now this time, and again it's exactly the same as I did with the other colours, just adding a little bit at a time. Get it, brush the majority off, and then going in and just picking it up. And then again, going through, just adding those textures. Now I find this to be very important with like 3D prints and stuff like that, because I can find them to be a little flat at times. So there you go. And what we're going to do, as I said, you can use a sepia, you could use a Mortarian grime, depending what kind of effect you want. As I said, I'm using a sepia because I want it to have a bit of warmth to it. Allow me a medium, but I also want it to be very, very watered down. I almost want it to be like transparent, so that's kind of what I'm going with. Slap that on, and I am, no, you can't see that, sorry guys, I am fairly slopping it, you can see there, get a few little bits, just spotting it around the robe there, or not robe, the undershirt, a little bit on the blade. Again, it's just kind of building up that rusted look, as you can see. It's very thin, so we're just going to wait for that to dry, and then we're going to move on to the flesh, and the flesh will just be back to layering. But yeah, it's starting to look quite nice. I'm liking it. Actually, I think I might do the blade before I do the flesh, in case I get any silver on the hands, because we're going to do a more dry brushing style on this. But yeah, we'll wait for that to dry, and then we'll come back and we'll do the next part. So there we are. I quite like that. I don't know if it really shows up, but you can see there the sort of textures that I've tried to go for. I like it. I like it. So now we're going with Lead Belcher. And I'm going with this chunky brush here. I'm just dabbing it in, rubbing it off. You can't see this. I'm basically circling to get as much off as possible. And then I'm just catching it like this. And the same on the back, starting at the blade and kind of brushing down to it. from the bottom. And then I'm going to move across to a dry brush. Gonna just, same again, get the majority of that off. I'm just, dare I say it without the internet laughing, I'm just edging it. Just edging it, going up. So, let's just pop. That's kind of the effect I've gone for. And again, we'll do the same on the back. Catching the edges first, and then just adding in, because I want the metal to look used. What we're going to do next is we're going to switch across from Lead Belcher to Rune Fang Steel, Games Workshop paint. Again, Army Painter, Two Thin Coats, Vallejo, they all do their own variations. All you're looking for is a gunmetal style of metal, and then something a little more shiny. And we're probably going to add some blood to this. I don't want to put fresh blood, but I wouldn't mind putting a little bit of dry blood on there. But yeah, so you can kind of see what we've gone for. If you really wanted to, you could then take a fine detail brush or the edge of one of your brushes, and you could kind of edge highlight with the Rune Fang. I don't particularly like to do that. But what I will do is I will go back to my glazes that I made before, once I've washed out my dry brush, because it's really important just to make sure all that paint comes out the dry brush. Otherwise, next time I try and use it on a different colour, some of that will come out. So we've got this kind of sepia and agrax there, so I'm going to take a little of this, a little of that, kind of bring them together, and then water it down, and then water it down, water it down, and then we're going to just wait for that to dry, and then we're going to move on to the flesh. We're coming really close to the end of this model now, because as you've seen, there's not a lot to him at all. So we'll be back in a second. I'll show you that metal once it's dried, and then we'll move on to doing the flesh, the teeth, and the buckles, and lastly just the base itself. I might go in and re-highlight this up a little bit, either with Rakarth Flesh or something like Wraithbone or something like that. Maybe Pallid Witch Flesh. Pallid Witch Flesh is a really weird chalky paint, so maybe not. But yeah, I'll be back in a second and we'll see where we're at. Right, so here we go. That's kind of the effect we got on the metal. What we're going to do now is just finish off like the little bits, like the skin, in which I'm just going back over with Cadian. Same mix as before, 1 for 1. I want it to stand out. Picking out his chins. He does have a lot of them, bless him. Is that on camera at all? No. Once again, no skill spared. Come back in. Grubby little fingers. Now the grubbiness of these actually works, obviously given the time period and things like that. So if you wanted to water your highlight down more, that would also work. So I'm just picking those knuckles out. Again, picking the knuckles out. Then with this, I'm going to grab some Kislev. I'm being really lazy and I'm just going to use the Kislev straight from the pot, but I really wouldn't advise it. But we're just going in, picking some raised little bits. And then around the mouth, the chins. Because what I want to do after that is I want to take Mortarian Grime, which is a fantastic little paint. This is Games Workshop's secret weapon. Mortarian Grime Shade. Let's take it. Again, I want that colour on the teeth. Just adding it to the hands. Round at the back as well. Tiny little bits on the mask. A bit on the coat. A little bit on the trousers. And get a wet brush and take some of it back off. So I just did it for the cloths and the materials. I haven't done it for the metals or anything like that. So next thing to do is the gold on the buckles. And then the teeth, and then we're onto the base. So we're going to let this dry. Mortarian Grime, though, really is your friend when you're doing cloths and things like that, especially old and worn cloths. It really can make the difference between a model looking okay or brilliant. Not that I think anything I paint is specifically brilliant, but anyway, we'll let that dry, and when we come back, you can see how it is. And then as we'll do the buckle, where we're going to try and be as neat as possible, but if we can't be, we can just pick out that middle bit again. It's not a big problem. So back in a second, guys. Right, guys, so I know these are going to be sad, but we'll come into the end. We've got to do the buckle, the base, a few other little bits, and that's us done. So because I bought 400 copies of the first ever Conquest magazine, I have 1 billion copies, or 1 billion pots, of Retributor armor. So we're going to use that one. I'm going to use it straight from the pot, because as I said, Games Workshop Metallics, it's pretty good. And with this, there's nothing fancy to it, really. I'm just picking out the gold. If I go over, it's not the end of the world, because I can just fill in that middle bit again directly. Yeah, this was the least exciting part of it. And normally I would wait for that to dry before I touched any bits up. That's what she said. But on this occasion, I'm just going to go in, go boop. And just give it a little boop to tidy it up. Now when this dries, that's really all I'm going to do. Just pop a little sepia wash over the top of it for its second coat, so I'm not even going to cover that. What I am going to, however, do is I'm going to jump straight to the little detailing on the cuffs, which I've decided I'm just going to go with a straight Bane blade brown on it, so it keeps the same colours, the same. Now, this will need 2 coats, and I'm cheating because I'm using it straight out the pot. Using it straight out the pot is never as good, because your consistencies are off. So when I do the second coat, I will mix that, because otherwise it'll bother me. I was being lazy. I know, shocking, me doing the easy way. I must confess, I have enjoyed painting with you guys, though. Even though, if I'm honest, you guys haven't been very talkative. I felt the conversation's been very one-sided. Yeah, that's kind of making me miss live streaming. As those who are new to the channel or didn't know, back in the day, during the pandemic, you know, the evil plague, Captain Trips, etc. We used to live stream every Monday, and then once gaming started back up again, obviously I could go back to gaming clubs, so I stopped that. But yeah, so that's just going to need a second coat. I'm going to go give the gold a second coat, and then I'm going to give it a sepia wash, and then we're going to be ready for the base. We're basically done at this stage. I will still show you how I do the bases. It's the same as I've done bases in previous videos, but, you know, I've done the rest of the model with you, so I might as well show you that as well. But yeah, guys, I'm going to go off and do the second coats on those bits, and then we'll come back and we'll do the base. When we're doing the base, we'll also do the little handle on the saw itself. After that, we might think about putting some very, very dry specks of blood under the blade. With that, we'll use Rhinox hide, and then we'll use a very, very light dry brushing of like corn red or something like that. Said, I don't want the blood to be fresh. I want it to look like it's been there a while, like this is not the first person he's killed kind of thing. We'll take it from there. But yeah, back in a second, guys, and then we'll look where we're at with him. Right, so here we are. I'm quite a fan of him. We're going to move on to the base now. We're going to use Mournfang, followed by Scrag. Ow! Scrag Brown, I just punched my light. Followed by Deathclaw Brown, and then Screaming Skull or Karak to finish it off, depending on what I think the base needs at the time. I'm going to use it straight out the pot, and I'm just going to dry brush it because I'm lazy. Now with these, I tend to do 2 coats or 2 dry brushes, and where possible, I won't wash my brush between them on account of if the paint mixes or anything like that. I think it just adds to the effect that I'm going for. You know me, guys. I'm lazy when it comes to painting. I love to paint, but I love to get models done as quick as possible. And if that means cutting a little corners, cheating a little bit, then I will do it. I do have the 2 thin coats versions of these colours, and I will be switching to them once these run out, in fairness. So in future videos, painting videos, you might end up seeing different paints for bases, but it will be the same colour, essentially. And I think a lot of times I use these for fantasy or mud style bases, because when I worked for Games Workshop, that was the colour we painted our bases. It was like the follow-on to Goblin Green, for those of you who are of the Goblin Green era, which sadly I also was, because, you know, I'm super, super old. Yeah, as someone very special to me will tell me constantly how ridiculously old I am. Which is what you want from the people closest to you in your life. You want them to just give you crap constantly about, you know, an arbitrary thing. As said, it is my birthday today, so I've reached the big 4-3. I know, a lot of you looking at a profile picture or something of me and thinking, he's only 43, and he looks 60. And you're right, I do. I've had a very hard life. You haven't met my kids, but you'd understand if you did. So I want the Screaming Skull now. So as I said, I've just been working through each colour. I did go with Screaming Skull in the end because I thought it would look better for what I needed or what I wanted. So then we've got kind of that effect. Whoa. I will try and perfect the arm before the next paint tutorial I do. Or I'll do my best at least anyway. So what I'm going to do now is, because I kind of want some patches to be a bit swampy, a bit wet mud. You know, this is a place where it'll probably rain a lot. I'm going to take some Atari Grime. You may have heard me sing its praises before, quite a bit. You could do this with a water effect if you wanted like an actual puddly effect. But all I'm doing is I'm just adding some wash here. Now, when this dries, it's obviously not going to look as thick or as wet, but it will add a little bit of texture and a little bit of colour to it. Right, and while that's doing that, last thing we're going to do is we're going to go and do the buttons. And for that, we said we were going to do them black, so I think I'm going to try a contrast paint, which is Black Templar. I suck with contrasts, full disclosure. Is the real reason I don't use them is I can't get them to work the way I want to. I guess it's because I'm super old, as we've just established. And I've been painting a certain way for a very long time. And I think contrast paints are just too difficult for my old man brain to figure out. And then all I'm going to do is I'm going to take a tiny little bit. I'm going to run it down there. Run it across there. Catch it in some of these little recesses. On the trousers. Flip it around. And then basically, once I've done the black rim around the base, I'm going to call him done because I want to. So, yeah, no other reason than that. Now, because of the model in question and when it's time period set and stuff, what I don't want to do is I don't want to put any flowers or anything fancy on the base. I'm going to keep it very sparse because I want it to feel much older. So what I will do is I will show you it at the end once I've done like the last little touches, the black rim around the base, and give it just a varnish just to protect it. Then what we'll do is we'll come back and I'll show you it, and then I'll do all the outro-y bits. You know, the bits you guys absolutely love. Thank you for this, blah, blah, blah for that. Yeah, so back in a second, guys, when this model should be finished. So here we are. I decided not to go with the blood in the end. I'm happy enough with him as he is. You know, in terms of paint job, outside of filming and stuff, I think the whole thing only took about an hour, 2 hours. I did a few little bits off camera, which was I gave the handle a very, very light dry brush, and I picked out the teeth a little bit more, but not a lot, because obviously it is olden day teeth. Other than that, he's completed. So I just wanted to show him off one last time. Obviously, thank you guys for watching. I really appreciate it when you watch any of our videos, but especially when I try something different or I try something I haven't done in a while. Obviously, our bread and butter is unboxing videos and gameplay videos. And since Nate left the channel just due to the fact we don't see that side of our friendship group anymore, there's been no one really doing painting videos. Is something I want to do more of. Obviously, I've got a lot of Trench Crusade minis that I want to throw some paint on. I've got some Necromunda, I've got Blood Bowl, I've got, well, you guys know I've got all the games, I buy too much stuff. So I would like to do some painting videos. I want to do a couple with some squigs and things like that. Yeah, so doing this was nice. It was just like a nice little step back into it. But yeah, I really enjoy doing stuff like this. I do want to make more content on the channel. I've been a bit preoccupied a lot recently. Mental health stuff, relationship stuff. This year's been a lot. But in 2026, I kind of want to get back to doing videos. Obviously, we turned off any kind of monetization or anything like that on the channel. So if you do see adverts, we haven't put them there. And really, YouTube isn't set up for our sort to succeed, because we cover niche within niche. Like, we're wargaming, but we cover niche little games. Outside of Trench Crusade, obviously Trench Crusade's massive, so is Necromunda and Blood Bowl, but most of the games we cover are smaller games like this. Obviously, is Don't Look Back. It is like a small niche game. It absolutely is. There's no way around it. We cover manufacturers like Crooked Dice, small company. Yeah, so our channel's always going to struggle, so the fact that you guys found us and appreciate what we do makes all the difference to us. So we do appreciate you. Let me know if you want to see some more painting videos in the comments. It's always cool to see what people want to see. Like, share, subscribe. Check out some of our other videos. As I said, I did an unboxing video for the founding. Very soon we've got an unboxing video for one of the isolated killers. On top of that, we've got some other videos coming out for some other things. War Crow, which is obviously made by the people who make Infinity. If you know anything about that game, it is quite a popular game. Infinity's not really for us. Too many rules, the models are too intricate, blah, 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 but a fantasy version of it does slap. Yeah, we've got a lot coming in 2026 anyway, so we're really glad that you stay and watch. But anyway, guys, like, share, subscribe, leave a comment, bell for notifications, social medias, all that business. Pray to Dice Gods, hope to smile upon you, and take care, guys. Thank you so much for watching. Bye now.